Pokemon Gold and Silver had a long and troubled development phase marked by repeated delays on top of a shift from Game Boy to Game Boy Color, having even gone from a significant overhaul between their first reveal in 1997 and their release date in 1999, leaving traces of a very different game. And it's in this troubled development cycle on such a small cartridge-based system that we can feel the complicated problems that come with speedrunning Pokemon Gold, Silver, and even Crystal. But before we dive into why, we need to take a look at how all the different Pokemon games handle speedrunning with RNG manipulations. For those unaware of this term, RNG manipulation is a process in which you try and manipulate the best outcome, or in the context of a speedrun, to help lessen the problems you deal with later on, so that a speedrun surrounded by differing levels of RNG can be played with more consistency. And for Pokemon, this will usually include starter Pokemon stats, 0 wild encounters until repels become available, or forcing HM friends to show up guaranteed. Sometimes these manipulations will even go so far as to guarantee a less than 1% chance for a legendary Pokemon to get inside of a Pokeball. And it's all for the sake of speedrunning a Pokemon game the fastest way possible. But these manipulations will differ in precision, depending on the generation of Pokemon they're performed in. Like how the Generation 1 through 3 Pokemon games all run at a nasty 60 frames per second, causing RNG manipulations to be much more precise and difficult to land. While Generation 4 and 5 run at 30 FPS, making hitting the RNG manipulations much easier, but still requiring a ton of execution due to battle and overworld RNG being separated, unlike the past games. Meaning, if you can perform precise enough movement, you can drag Gen 4 and 5 manipulations from one town to the other without getting a single encounter through massive portions of the game. And while this can be done in Generations 1 through 3 to an extent, it becomes much harder when the overworld and battle RNG are linked together, since battle RNG doubles the speed of the RNG, making the manipulations twice as difficult. Luckily, these manipulations are made with human precision in mind, but for Generation 2 Pokemon games, it gets pretty ridiculous, with not only how much needs to be manipulated over the course of the game, but also just how precise your actions need to be to pull off these manipulations in the first place. The first manipulation performed in all Generation 2 Pokemon speedruns will be the lottery ID manipulation. On the surface, this looks super weird. Like when you were a kid who would rewind a movie just to have a scene play over and over again because you thought it was funny. Please tell me I wasn't the only one who did this. But it's so much more than that. Because the first time you start up a file on a cartridge that doesn't have a save file, the ID that the lottery checks for down the line is set for any file you make on the cartridge from that point forward, and will be in effect that lasts for 24 hours once a save file is present. Once the lottery manip is successfully performed, it'll be followed up by a soft reset alongside the start of a timer that counts down from 54 seconds. And this is all because the exact second that you hit A on starting a new game has an impact on the RNG after setting up the lottery manip. Then once the timer is completely up and speedrunners have gone past the intro sequence of the game, they have to start yet another timer on the final text box of the intro cutscene. This will be used to save the game at a specific time frame, because unlike Generation 1 or 3 where you don't have to worry as much about how you save, Generation 2 will only give you 58 seconds to reach the lab, get through all the text boxes, and be ready for an 11 out of 60 frame window to press A on saving the game. And this is all to get a consistent manipulation that gets you a nearly perfect Totodile after the initial save we just timed in the lab portion of the game. Not timing everything I just mentioned can make things go very wrong, and can go as far as to make these precise manips stop working altogether, all because of how the game was developed. And no game in the series comes close to requiring you to do this. One thing you might have noticed if you've seen one of my Hard Gold Soul Silver speedrunning videos is that the fastest starter Pokemon in the remakes is Cyndaquil, but Totodile is used in Generation 2 Pokemon games? This is all due to the move Rage combined with Bellsprout Tower not being a requirement for Gold, Silver, Crystal like it is in Heart Gold, Soul Silver. While the move Rage is a move that builds strength each time that you get hit after using it, making it a very good early game move when none of your moves will usually KO anyways, especially against the first 3 Johto gym leaders. But we still have a ton of manipulations to get through before then, like the 0 encounter manipulations on 4 of the early game routes. These manipulations will vary in precision, requiring you to sometimes stand in a certain direction before saving, or walk a specific path based on how the NPCs in the overworld shift direction, or even how you have to press the A button when you're passing over these screen squares on this map. And speaking of shifting direction, this was the first game in the franchise to introduce spinners. Spinners are optional trainers that spin in a bit of a pattern for Generation 2 games, and will typically turn in a favored direction depending on which way they're facing. And there are a lot of them throughout the game. Luckily, RNG manipulations can solve this for some of them, but once you're given the bicycle, it no longer becomes worth the effort. But one thing that might be worth the effort is subscribing to the channel for more Pokemon speedrunning content. Let's talk about the final frontier of problems with speedrunning Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal. We talked about how manipulations differ between generations of Pokemon, how Generation 2 complicated their precision, and even the massive amount of RNG manipulations. But what we haven't talked about is the goal of winning the lottery. Winning the lottery in Pokemon Gold and Crystal solve an issue presented by both games, but will be a different problem between the both of them. By the time you've gotten past the first and second gym leader, you'll have evolved your starter to its mid-evolution. And once you've beaten the third gym, most of the Johto region opens up to you. But to open up that third gym, we need access to the radio card, which is conveniently placed right next to the lottery, where we'll receive a Master Ball for winning, letting you catch whatever you want in the wild besides trainer Pokemon, meaning you can take a note from Heart Gold, Soul Silver manipulations and catch a Raikou for Pokemon Crystal. This manipulation, much like the others, is specific and precise in its requirements, like the fact that you only have an hour to catch Raikou before the RNG manipulation becomes less precise, or how you need to memorize 3 paths to get Raikou to spawn below Ikrudiak City in 3 different ways based on the 3 different frames you land on, with A presses on the specific tiles that line up RNG just right to get this crazy cat to show up with enough stats for a speedrun. Ugh. Which is a process made much simpler for a Heart Gold, Soul Silver speedrun where you just need to play a radio and follow a direct path. More on that in a future video. But what about Pokemon Gold? Well, as it turns out, Pokemon Gold doesn't go inside a burnt tower like Crystal. It's a completely optional area that isn't worth going inside, even for a legendary dog, making Totodile the Pokemon we'll use as our main from the beginning to the end of the game, letting us use the Master Ball on something else. Like, I don't know, maybe a shiny Pokemon? You see, no matter how you play Generation 2 without glitches, you'll always be required to encounter the red Gyarados, as its red scale is a key item that will cause lands to appear below where red Gyarados originally spawned once you've beaten, caught, or used a Pokédoll on it, since you can't run away from it otherwise. But why would you need to catch it when you can just KO or Pokédoll it? Well, you see, for the first time in Pokemon speedrunning history, catching a shiny Pokemon is faster than not catching it, all because it learns the HMs for Waterfall and Whirlpool. And while we could catch Poliwag for that, this just becomes the faster option due to the 0 encounter manipulations combined with the forced red Gyarados encounter, making Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal a complicated speedrun with its ridiculously precise and particular manipulations. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Pokemon Crystal speedrunning, check out the video on the left for a look into speedruns of the remix Heart Gold, Soul Silver. And while you're at it, consider subscribing for more Pokemon speedrunning content.